start right away with the very first panel for the day, which is about Indian e-commerce, staying power, profitability, and unit economics are back. Now, with an aggressive competition for market share, huge advertising spends and aggressive customer acquisition methods, are the Indian e-commerce players building sustainable businesses with visibility on their bottom line? Will these e-commerce stories survive if capital supply dries up? What will differentiate the winners from those who might not make it? Are these businesses which are unhealthy and ripe enough to burst? How are the unit economics working for e-commerce players today? Covering all these points, we have our panelists right here whom we would like to invite on stage. Mr. Mahesh Murthy is the managing partner of Seed Fund. He has 26 years of marketing and advertising experience, of which 15 are online marketing. Our next panelist on the session is Mr. Harish Behel, founder and CEO of Smile Interactive. He co-founded the global incubator SpringStar, which is promoting entrepreneurship in the digital space by launching multiple successful business models. Our next panelist on the session is Mr. Prashant Prakash, partner Axel Partners. Let's hear it from Mr. Prashant Prakash, please. Our next panelist on the session is Mr. Dhruv Shringi, CEO Yatra Online. Mr. Dhruv returned to India after 8 years in Europe, and his most recent role prior to co-founding Yatra was as Director Group Operations and Technology of the eBookers Group, where he was responsible for sales of over $850 million achieved through multi-channels, including online call centers and retail shops. Prior to his stint at eBookers, he has worked with Ford Motor Company in their business strategy team based in London, and also has significant work experience in India, having spent over 6 years with Arthur Andersen based in his office in Delhi. Let's hear it from Mr. Dhruv Shringi, please. Last but not least, we have with us Mr. Amrish Murthy, founder and CEO of Pepperfry.com. Let's hear it for Mr. Amrish Murthy, please. I'll now request Mr. Mahesh Murthy to kindly take it forward from here. So.
Hi all, good morning. With such an awesome panel, there's not much I have to do really other than, specifically maybe, we'll start with Amrish. Talk about, one of the things, Amrish ran eBay, one of perhaps India's largest e-commerce company, before he started his own company, Pepperfry. And what was the secret to, eBay turning red to black? So we'll probably start with Amrish and spend a few minutes each.
So, Mahesh, inherently, I think from a customer standpoint, in my view, demand's as robust as it can be. I think Indian e-commerce is still early stage. There is, if anything, we should compare ourselves as with the Indian retail space. The retail space is really large compared to all of the turnovers of all of the e-commerce companies put together. And before I think e-commerce were to get affected, it needs to be a sizable chunk of overall Indian retail, and I think it's still some time away from that. Consequently, I think the market's growing really well. Again, depending on whom you accept or whom you read, e-commerce would grow between 50 to 100% this year. So there is inherent customer demand. That said, I think there is a little more caution in terms of how the investments are flowing into the sector. There was a really bullish period over the last few years when a lot of money came into the sector. A lot of money that's been now subsequently, part of it has been utilized by companies which have been here for a period of time. And I think investors are now being a little more cautious and about whom they invest in and so on, which is not to say that good business models and good, good companies don't get investments. I think good companies always get invested in. But the mood is one of a little more, a little higher degree of circumspection, which is driven by, how the money is used, but the inherent customer demand continues to stay. And I think that in my mind would be the two highlights of, the last 6 months to a year in e-commerce.
One more question to you, Amrish. We were just discussing this earlier. We have pretty low, average transaction size is 800, 1200 rupees. That's a gross value. Your margin on that may be 15, 20 odd percent. So that's about 100, 200 rupees. And your cost of acquisition typically is 1500, 1400, 2000 rupees. How does this all, and then on top of that, you have a cost of delivery, you have free freight, free shipping, cash on delivery, and there's returns when people don't, So how do you, given all this, how do you manage in this low margin, high cost of acquisition environment? Well, what specific tips can you offer?
Okay. Let me actually take the Pepperfry example. And I think there are broadly 2 to 3 segments in the Indian market, which is in terms of products. So you have technology, which is perhaps the largest segment of e-commerce today. A whole bunch of people, because technology are brand new products, they typically have standard products. Customers have a high degree of confidence in buying them. So that is driving the largest chunk of, or a large chunk of the e-commerce space today. Then you have books, which are again standard products, typically slightly lower ASP or slightly lower selling price, order value, but high margins. And then you have the third space, which is all of our lifestyle products, etc., where the margin structures, etc., are decent. Now, speaking as a business which inherently operates in the lifestyle space, I have great product margins. Okay, what that allows me to do is it allows me to make a certain amount of money on every transaction that I do. It allows me to plow a certain amount of that money back into the service that I provide to the customer. The other thing which I think again, if you tweak your marketing and if you decide which customer segment you're going to go after, you change your merchandise accordingly. So effectively, I operate, and I asked this question inside, I operate higher than that average order value band because of the nature of categories that I am servicing. Pepperfry has a lot of furniture, Pepperfry has a lot of jewelry, Pepperfry has fashion jewelry which is expensive, clothing that's expensive, etc., etc. So you're able to tweak your average order value, you make more money on it, therefore you take that money and you can plow that into providing great service, right? So that's one good way of doing it. The other way of doing it, and all entrepreneurs will face this problem. Actually, even as you go and have conversations with, funding and venture capital, you'll be asked this question: what's your cost of acquisition? One of the biggest factors in a cost of acquisition is the fact that new businesses have higher costs of acquisition than older businesses. Don't beat yourself for it. It is a reality. As businesses get older, their quality scores on engines like Google, etc., improve. Those quality scores result in lower costs of acquisition. So in the beginning, your costs of acquisition are going to be high. How you counter it could be through different strategies. Could be through strategies of, potentially farming. Go get a whole bunch of registered users, ensure that those registered users activate, which you could do through a combination of coupons, rewards, etc., etc. You decide your incentive structure, you decide how you wish to activate. If you were to follow that strategy, what you might wind up doing is actually have a lower cost of acquisition, which is one of the benefits that we have at Pepperfry. The third thing is, I think everything in Indian commerce, in Indian e-commerce, starts with this term, and I think this might be very different from what my co-panelists might think, starts with the term cash on delivery. I think cash on delivery is important, but hey, a great e-commerce business needs to control the quantum of cash on delivery that it actually services, or cash on delivery orders. Because the cost structure on those orders is higher. If you're able to design an incentive system, especially for your customers, which ensures that the cash on delivery component of your overall transactions is low, you will further improve unit economics. You will make a lot more money on a margin basis.
Cool. Thanks, Ambrish. I'll actually turn to Dhruv. I'll actually start with an observation that I think at an earlier conference that a few of us were speaking at, Jaspreet Bindra shared, and Jaspreet said something really interesting. He said, look, just like in India, like in the West, you had 100% landline penetration, then you went to mobile after that. In India, we just had 5% landline penetration, boom, and we jumped to 70% mobile penetration. Again, in the West, in terms of e-commerce, you had the small corner store, then you had the local supermarket, then you had the big mega store, then you had the enormous super mega store, and then you had the online store. And here in India, we just simply jump to the online store. In some ways, we won't go through those cycles. And so the first question to you is, do you see this leapfrog happening? What would you have done differently, given that what you know now, if you had known this 5-6 years ago?
Right. I think to address your question first, Mahesh, in terms of why e-commerce has boomed, and especially service-led e-commerce has boomed in India, my hypothesis is that's happened because the physical infrastructure sucks. I think that is a reality of India. Because the physical infrastructure is poor, as a consumer you find a way of transacting online. And I think this is ably demonstrated by the Indian Railways. Right? No one thought for a minute that they'd be doing 300, 400,000 transactions a day. But that has happened. The same has happened in travel. And the reason it has happened in travel is because you're not constrained by physical delivery. You get an e-ticket. And for a lot of people in India, when they started traveling, e-ticket was the only ticket they knew. right? I remember when we transitioned in Europe from paper tickets to e-tickets, it was a nightmare. People were still wondering where is that physical coupon that they get. For a lot of people out here, the first ticket interaction they had was an SMS on their phone that your ticket's been booked, go to the counter and pick up your ticket. So that's how people have evolved. So I think there is this opportunity that we have today because of not having a strong legacy system to leapfrog a technical generation. Go back to how legacy systems were built and how people moved from legacy systems to new age and web systems. The people who were able to do that were the ones who did not have legacy systems. So I think to a great extent India's model is similar to that. We don't have a legacy system, hence we can build newer models which can scale up much faster. In terms of the other question that you were asking about the business, so the business by way of background was set up in 2006. So in the last 5 years we've grown from a 2-member team to about 1,400 people at the moment. Our transaction value would have gone up from about doing 70, 80 transactions a day to in the last 12 months we would have done a GMV of almost $800 million plus. So the business has scaled significantly. So there is an opportunity to scale a business in a short period of time. And we've been through a relative degree of slowdown. So 2008, 9, July 2008, or July, August, September when Lehman was crashing, most of us thought the world would come to an end, right? But one of the things that as an entrepreneur you need to do when these changes are happening is be flexible with your business model, right? We launched an entire B2B business at that point in time because the dynamics of the B2C part were different, right? You did not have the capital to aggressively go out and build a consumer brand. So you invested in feet on street and had a model over there. So I think you have to be flexible with your business model on that front to be able to capitalize on that. And as you go through this process, you will realize that the first million, 2 million, 5 million, whatever that number is, 5 years back that chunk size used to be 1 to 2 million. Today that bullet seems to be 10 to 15 million. You will have to use that capital aggressively to execute well on it. Only if you're able to use that capital well will you get subsequent rounds. And ultimately, if you're looking at getting into the e-commerce space, it is about building a category. It's about changing consumer behavior. It will be an expensive proposition. I don't think it's going to be a 5-10 million game, right? So you have to be able to think through that and say, okay, will my business reach a certain scale? What are the milestones that I need to achieve in the interim from now till there? And how do I go about reaching each of these milestones with the capital that I have at the moment?
So let me actually take you further on that. Your business is a little different from Ambarish's. I mean, he is somewhat distinguished. He's got a differentiated product. You sell a commodity air ticket. You sell the same air ticket that MakeMyTrip sells, that ClearTrip sells, and half a dozen other guys sell, and the airline itself sells. How do you, A, get differentiation, B, get brand loyalty, and how do you do this without discounting deeply? I mean, how do you get people to keep coming back to you for essentially buying a commodity product? And this is really, I think, an issue many e-com companies face, because today, for example, a lot of these guys are selling the same thing at the same price and trying to undercut each other on price. What are the 2 or 3 things that you tell this audience that's important for them to do?
I think, firstly, just to lay some of the metrics out there, the repeat buy on domestic flights would be almost 60%. So it went through a phase initially when there was deep discounting happening. I don't think we would have done any discounting on domestic flights for the last 2 to 3 years. With that sort of a repeat buy, that business is immensely profitable. MakeMyTrip's numbers are public, and I think they'll hit a $8 to $10 million sort of an EBITDA, and that is where it's coming from. So the focus, once you've done the acquisition, has to be on getting that customer to come back to you. The differentiation happens to a great extent through brand. And I'm a true believer in brand. I truly believe the old-fashioned FMCG way of brand building is not dead in the e-commerce space. There is limited search queries available, there is limited online, but I feel even online brands are built offline. Because the most important thing for a customer today for transacting online is trust. And when he sees an offline advertisement, that helps generate tremendous amount of trust. That is, I think, the core logic why we have been very aggressive in terms of offline brand building. So our brand recall numbers, wherever you would see, would be significantly higher. And you also have to decide which India you want to go after. I think the sanest piece of advice I was given when we were starting up is that there are multiple Indias. You need to decide which India you want to go after, which consumer segment you're trying to go after, and then be aggressive on that segment. If you adopt a spray and pray approach, you'll end up burning through a lot of money. And we took the approach that saying, okay, we will not be too metro-centric. Right? Our name Yatra lended itself to be more mass, so go after a mid-tier SME segment. So our marketing campaigns have been tailored around that, our customer acquisition strategies have been tailored around that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been able to get a high repeat base. Because that segment still is more India friendly. It does not view international sites and stuff like that.
This is more Bharat than India.
This is more Bharat than India. In the Hindi-speaking mass population, in some of the other vernacular markets, so be it Gujarat, be it Maharashtra, be it Tamil Nadu. So in these vernacular markets, this is where we've gone.
How big is a phone compared to online in this market?
It again varies by product. So if, surprisingly, for domestic flights, under 5% of our business happens on the phone. 95% of our business, so which is almost translating into 20,000 plus tickets a day, happens online.
Great. I'll actually come to you, Prashant. So for those of you who didn't hear the introduction, Prashant's an investor in Flipkart, the kind of, in some ways, the bellwether or the big boy that everybody wants to follow in the space. So I'm just going to ask Prashant to cover a few things. I mean, what's the difference between then and now, between 6 months ago and today? What are the demand numbers you're seeing? So we've heard that. And we'll quickly just do that from the business point of view. But very quickly, I want us to flip to now the investor's point of view, saying, okay, you are investing pretty aggressively. You've consolidated your own companies. What is your outlook going forward on e-commerce investments?
Yeah, I'll start off just reinforcing some of the points that Dhruv. I think, e-commerce is an extremely complex one where on one end of the spectrum, you're building a brand like an FMCG. On the other end of the spectrum, you're building a product, and not one product, but usually 2 to 3 complex products to actually cover the whole components of the puzzle. So it's very easy sometimes to underestimate both these aspects, and I think people can get caught up trying to optimize your SEM spends and online Google spends and some of those, like what Amrish was saying. And also on the product side, it requires a significant technology investment to actually build out some of these products. Even optimizing your customer acquisition costs actually over a period of time gets built by a bunch of deep analytics components built into your business, whether it's farming or whether it's remarketing. All these require significant smarts and technology investment. So don't underestimate the amount of technology that needs to be built in. Second is on the FMCG brand side. I think for the more generic businesses, what we saw in Flipkart was going beyond the internet definitely expanded the customer base, and I think that's still the early days in terms of the customer reach and who you're actually tapping. I think just in terms of the number of people who probably have an intent to do e-commerce and product e-commerce and what we are reaching today, I would say we are less than 30% covering the number of people who want to actually do e-commerce. Now getting back to your thing in terms of just the cycles that funding has gone through, I think if you just look at how China or US or some of these economies went through the funding cycles, I think there are early movers. There are funds that take very early bets, and they seed a bunch of companies, and some of these are well executed and become large and become bellwethers and set the market trends. But I think there is always a period, and this could be 6 months, this could be a year, where everybody kind of takes a step back and just kind of sees how are things really playing out. And I think
we taken a step back.
We have taken enough bets in e-commerce, and I don't think we have taken a step back. We have made 2 investments in the last 1 month. I think the type of companies that we are looking for are very different, and there's definitely, like Amrish said, broad horizontal plays that still will continue to get built. But I think a lot of differentiation in vertical plays is what we believe today value can get built in, and it's easier to build brand differentiation. It's easier to build differentiation in terms of what you're offering to the customer, which the customer cannot get offline today. You can bring new brands to the table that are not easily accessible. So I think there is a lot of curation and a lot of specialization that you can build to your merchandise and product by going vertical. And some of these are also very complex categories. You can address them at the surface when you're doing a broad horizontal play, but some of them just require a lot of deep, intense specialization. So we believe that those plays are not done. I think you will see, maybe not immediately, but over a period of next 6 to 18 months, different investors may not be Axel, may not be the tigers of the world who have taken very early bets, but there will be people who will build a new generation of these commerce companies.
So you're talking about moving from horizontal to verticals. We talked a little earlier saying a horizontal broad e-commerce play, whether it's in travel or even generic goods, takes 50, 100, 150, $200 million or whatever it is. But now you want to do verticals. Are these cheaper? Do they take less money? What are the kinds of investment amounts you're looking at, first round as well as life cycle?
Yeah, and I think it's a fair thing to talk about, what's the ultimate size of the business that you're building? Are you building $1 billion business? Are you building a $2 billion or a $3 billion business? And yes, the first 10 million, like Dhruv said, has to be used very well, and you need to show that you can execute in an exemplary fashion with that first 10 million to get your next 50 or 100. But it's not easy to build 10 $1 billion internet companies out of India in the next few years. I don't think either from a market or a capital perspective that is practical. So I think entrepreneurs need to plan for building different sizes of businesses, and I think the capital that you would take is very different in each case. So I would say a vertical business that can get to a couple $100 million, $300 million businesses in size may take $40, $50 million of investment. $1 billion plus horizontal play, I can't see how you can do that in less than $300, $400 million of investment.
So, what's the advice you'd give to entrepreneurs? I mean, what are the 2 or 3 or 4 checklists that they have to check in their business plans before they approach you, for them to pass your filters, to be considered for investment by you?
Differentiation. So for us, if it's another company that's already in our portfolio, it just would not make sense. So for Axel, we have 8 to 9 e-commerce investments. So it definitely needs to be in a space, in an area where you can show differentiation. I think there are some areas, and Ambrish would agree, like in apparel and some of these, Harish, in the own brand apparel space, where yes, there are spaces for more than one brands, and globally it's quite apparent that multiple brands get built out in some of these spaces. So I'm not saying that if there is a similar business, it's impossible that we'll fund it, but I think it has to be very different from what we already invested.
Great. I'll come to you, Harish. I mean, you have investments in India, in Brazil, in various parts of the emerging market world. What change have you seen in the last 6 months? What's new? What's different? On the e-commerce front, I mean, on both consumer demand front as well as the investing sentiment front.
I think the investing sentiment is going up and down I think the cycles in which the investor sentiment is like going high and low is probably it's most volatile in India, I would say, right? And I think to be fair to the investors, the first phase was about adoption and seeing demand. So that brought a lot of excitement in. And I think second phase is about seeing path to profitability. And because I think most of us as entrepreneurs got a little carried away, and there was a relatively less focus on unit economics as compared to customer acquisition. That's caused a bit of, I would say, discipline coming into the VCs. I wouldn't say they are, at least all the investors that I deal with, I haven't seen anyone not willing to invest. I think there is more, the questions are more around what is your path to profitability as against the questions maybe 6 months or 1 year back, which was, will this take off, right? So I think to me, that's the biggest change that I've seen. That everyone now believes that e-commerce is for real. Everyone now believes that consumers are going to buy on the internet, right? So that question has become sort of a pre-take in every investor's mind. But which businesses will become profitable, which will not become profitable? What is your strategy? Do you have any differentiated strategy to become profitable? I think that's becoming very crucial.
So let's talk about path to profitability. I mean, what are the things that you tell your companies, either in terms of increasing margins or in terms of reducing costs? And what are your expectations from a startup, in terms of time or the money it will take to get to profitability?
Okay.
An e-commerce startup.
So I think, look, it's like you have to, I personally think that you have to keep changing. There's no one philosophy, right? So like the first phase is like a sprint, right? So your journey from $0 to $1 million per month run rate is more like a sprint, right? Because as everybody said, that you have to, you need $50 to $100 million, or Prashant actually went even more generous and said $300 to $400 million. But basic thing was that you need a lot of money to build e-commerce, and the fact of life is no one is going to give you the big check day one, right? So the first phase is, it's like a sprint, and how fast can you show the momentum, right? So startups are like the pub business, right? So I haven't seen a pub which didn't take off in its first 1 month and became the rage, and then became successful after 11 months, right? Either you take off or you don't take off. Then the only option is you have to change the interior, change the board, rebrand it, and then, probably start again. So I think first it has to take off, because once it is taking off, and taking off does not mean just top line growth. It could be good sound unit economics, great customer experience, whatever. You can define takeoff for your business. That will generate interest for your, I would say, the potential investors that you need.
But let's go into that. I mean, so how do you get this takeoff without spending huge marketing dollars? Or
No,
is that a necessity?
So this is one lesson which I learned in e-commerce, that are you, of course everything is important, so it's not saying only A is important versus B, but the confusion which I always had in my mind was, that is a great e-commerce company a great retail company, or a great marketing company, or a great technology company? And I think what, after doing a lot of mistakes, I learned was that a great e-commerce company is a great technology company. Not saying that the rest doesn't need to be done, but if there is one primary DNA that you need to pick for your organization, I think it is tech, right? I think, and everybody said that in different forms. He said I would have focused more on product. Everybody said that, right? And if you go into the history and look at all great successful e-commerce companies in the US as well, companies which had the tech DNA as compared to companies which had the retail DNA, the companies with tech DNAs in the long run built better companies. And I think if you have a tech mindset, then you always find a geeky way to do everything, whether it is your last mile issue, or your cost of acquisition, or user experience, because we've talked about path to profitability, and in path to profitability, it finally boils down to unit economics. And the single largest differentiator that you can create in any of the unit economics, whether it is your customer acquisition cost, or your direct cost linked to this thing, is fundamentally driven by some sort of tech innovation. If you don't have tech, then probably that's.
But I've been in several discussions. I mean, one of the things that doesn't get a lot of praise, or doesn't get a lot written about, is I think in a couple of years, 2-3 years ago, when it came to at least product e-commerce, we always had a doubt, if I bought this, would this come? Aayega kya? Kab aayega? In the last 2-3 years, we figured out everybody has sorted out the back-end issue, largely. You order, it'll come. 4-5 दिन में तो 8-7 दिन आ ही जाता है, right? So in many ways, we've cracked the back-end issue, right? So, and whether it's through technology or through outsourcing or whatever, somehow we've hardcore cracked it. Perhaps, in our eagerness to copy things that have already worked elsewhere, we've copied. There's a bunch of sites that all look like Amazon on the front end. It's perfectly fine to look like Amazon on the back end. So once that happens, that you all have, you sell the same kind of product and the same kind of look and feel. There's a bunch of sites that look like Gilt. There's a bunch of sites that look like Amazon. Aren't you then, kind of telling the customer that this is just a commodity, you can buy this from anywhere? How do you make that difference there?
No, I don't, honestly, I don't agree to that. In fact, a lot of questions are asked, why is Flipkart being overrated and overhyped and stuff, right? And I think if you really get into the consumer's expectation, he has a very simple expectation: deliver what you promise. And I think one company which has really sorted that out right has been Flipkart, that whether it is a function of the category they are in, that they are into books, where the chances of you returning something or having an unhappy this thing, whatever be the reasons, right? But I think this view that आ तो जाएगा ही 4 दिन में, नहीं तो 8 दिन में, I think आ तो जाएगा ही 1 दिन में and 2 दिन में also makes a huge difference. And the fact that can you ship it in 1 day versus 2 days itself creates a huge differentiation between a good company and a great company.
But these are things that people will learn. If somebody learns to ship it in 1 day and you're doing it in 2 days, within 2 months we know we will copy it.
Yeah.
No, we are very good at learning these kinds of things. But in terms of differentiating on the front end, we are all selling a phone. Why would I buy from company A versus company B? We're selling the same phone unless you sell it cheaper. How do I create that differentiation?
Can I also just support the point he was making on the technology and the analytics and how, and it's not just technology, I feel it's also robust analytics. The key thing to a great extent, Mahesh, is what's happening under the hood. What is happening on the face of it from a consumer experience, you try and keep as homogeneous as possible because consumers find it easier. That's the habit they get used to. But how you're doing it in the back end, in the sense, what sort of analytics are you picking to throw the customer related products? How are you going back to him in terms of telling him that, hey, how was your experience? And from a DNA point of view, how are you constantly innovating? So coming back to the point of replication, see, things will get replicated either in 3 to 6 months, right? That is the only horizon that you have. So to remain constantly ahead of the curve, your DNA needs to be focused on that. You constantly need to be thinking about product innovations. I think one of the things that we didn't do well enough initially was this. We were more focused on brand as opposed to product innovation. Now that DNA has changed.
Yeah, and I think, I don't want to get into specific names. So let's say you enjoy buying from me, but this guy is today selling cheaper, and you go and buy through him, doesn't really mean that I've lost you, right? Because next, sooner or later, he'll have to start selling at the same price that I am selling, because how long can you keep giving that discount? And if I have a better product, if I have a better user experience, then he's bound to lose you and you're going to come back to me, right? So I think if the choice is between discount and great experience, yes. I think giving discount works very well, position perspective. I don't think discount works very well from a retention perspective.
Yeah, how does it work with loyalty? I mean, we were talking about it earlier that we all have an issue with loyalty.
Loyalty can't be discount. There is I don't think there is any loyalty to the word discount. Discount can be associated to adoption. Discount can be associated to sampling, like, making the first trial. So yes, if I am not a believer in what you're selling and you want me to try it, maybe you can use discount as a vehicle to, make me try what you're saying. But how can I be loyal to you if the only reason I come to you is because you are cheaper than Mr. X, right? That's not loyalty.
I have two things to add. I would broad base the technology piece, and I would say that perhaps the DNA needs to be user experience. Okay, which need not necessarily be just the fulfillment user experience, can be the user experience driven by product also. That's the first aspect. The second is, I think this, as we evaluate most businesses, especially when you're new, you need to have a great reason for users to try you out. Now, what do people try out first? Stuff that is fairly standard, which is readily available or they have seen earlier. They find, say, a price differential, and so therefore you're giving them a compelling proposition to actually buy something from you. As long as you do a good job of delivering to that, right, you have set a certain benchmark with the customer saying, hey, you're a good person, you're a good company, you basically deliver to what you promise. There is a second stage that happens, which is, once I've become e-commerce, I've tried you out, I'm an e-commerce customer who's tried out another site, 5 other sites, etc. What I actually then go for are things like variety, are things like range, are things like, perhaps a totally different selection from what exists in the e-commerce space today, right? And that, in those, very often, customers are, because they've done the first trial, know that you delivered and you've done a good job, etc., etc., customers can be informed through the buying process that, look, this one, because I'm providing a great range, takes 14 days for me to deliver. Because I have a business mechanism in the back end, which needs to, basically, I need to make to order or whatever you want to call it, and I will get it to you in 14 days. After the trial phase is over, the customer actually accepts that. Also, there is this entire element of replicating offline retail. I think today one of the things in online retail, I think it's a real fear. I actually think online retail experience in India is better than offline retail experience in India. You have a problem with the product, it gets returned, you get discounts on the products that you buy, you get, you can ship it across, even that have it picked up from your house, you don't even need to do anything, etc., etc. The one thing that online retail does not provide customers today in India is variety. And I think if online retail is to become really big, the categories that are going to fundamentally drive it are lifestyle categories, and those lifestyle categories are essentially driven by variety. So this entire variety conundrum, I don't think has even been addressed. Variety will drive loyalty. Discounts don't. Discounts drive trial. So in my view, the 2 points. One is it's more a user experience DNA. I think there is a role for discounts in generating trial. I think the longer term loyalty benefits, etc., come from aspects such as variety, as long as you provided a great experience on the customer's first transaction. That would be my take.
So Mahesh, I'll probably add one thing here. I think as you move towards lifestyle and brands and some of these categories, I think the site is not going to look like another Amazon. Right, how you engage the user and how your brand comes through and how you differentiate your brand has to be very different. And
it hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened. I think that's the big opportunity.
I think we've done a really good job on the back end. We haven't done a job on the front end yet.
You still have your Amazon look and feel or your diapers look and feel.
Right.
That's not going to work for a lot of brands.
So I'll just, before I come to the audience, the guys keep your questions ready. I'll do take a show of hands. One question to you, Arishan. What do you tell your entrepreneurs today that you did not tell them maybe 6 months ago?
Cash is king, profit is God.
Cash is king, profit is God. Great. I think on that note, we'll probably take a round of questions from the audience. We have about 20-25 minutes.
Morning, everybody. Myself, Madhusudan Lakhotia from Mumbai. And my the first point, I'm myself venturing into e-commerce. One thing I'm noticing, the thing is all the investors and the e-commerce entrepreneurs are both of the segments are in a hurry to make this market more matured faster. Is this the question? We are making more hurry in making investments, or we are making more hurry in making more expense in the sort of marketing, creating a brand and getting customers acquired. And what I feel is this is making the e-commerce ventures not into a profitable area.
So your question is, are investors pushing e-commerce companies to spend too much, and is that bad? Do you want to take a shot at this?
I think I don't think that investors necessarily push entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs always have a mind of their own, and great entrepreneurs do, and I think they are definitely going behind a vision they have, and investors can only be supportive. Now, to answer your specific question, I think if you look at the ramp of some of the e-commerce companies in India and you compare it to Brazil and Turkey, it's not like e-commerce companies are outperforming those markets in India in any way. So I think it's a reasonable expectation for a young business to grow as fast as it can, but do it through innovations that we all spoke about. Use technology for that innovation. Use Facebook, for example, has hardly been tapped in this country, and you have 50 million Facebook users, and everybody spends money on Google. So as an entrepreneur, you probably should achieve the same expectations for yourself in growth, but use different channels to acquire customers or do other stuff. So I think it's not fair to say that investors are pushing entrepreneurs.
Great. We'll take the next question.
Hi, I'm Pradeep Nagraj. I'm a product manager at Airtel M-Commerce Service. My question is on the payment itself. One of the biggest options and problems in e-commerce has been that...
Speak a little louder, Harish.
Yeah. One of the biggest problems in e-commerce has been that people do not have payment options online. So and as Ambrish pointed out, cash on delivery is not the most cost-efficient option. So are e-commerce companies focusing on alternate payment options, and what are the trends?
It's not electronic payment or cash on delivery. What other choices do you have?
I take that?
Yeah.
So there are lots of good payment models which have sprung up, right? So you have folks like Suvidha, access to some form of electronic payment, right? The number of people who actually do goods e-commerce in India, goods e-commerce, which is buying products online, would be sub 7, 8, 9 million. Again, they now start using them online. I think it's only a question of time. Till that time, COD will play a role, but as businesses will expand, more and more customers use, as repeat rates go up, which incidentally is the other thing that defines COD incident. When you first try, you want to see the product. Once you start trusting a company, you're okay paying electronically if you have an electronic payment method. A lot of what you see today is driven by the stage of the industry. It's as you have trial, COD is larger. As you have more repeat customers, electronic payments start playing a larger role, and so on. So I think it's part of the evolution. I mean, sorry if it's a longish answer. But
I think I'm going to give you a bonus. I'm going to have a second person answer your question because I know that Prashant has different views on this, and I do believe that, for example, you were telling me last time that a lot of Flipkart's future is predicated on cash and delivery.
No, I was just saying that there is an access problem in terms of number of people with electronic payment capability. Now let's leave that aside. I think it's very painful to do repeat purchases where every time you got to go give your credit card, you do your second factor. It's not easy in India to do one click. And a lot of people are using COD as a replacement for one click.
And, I totally agree with Prashant on that. At the end of it, how much cost inefficient COD is. It's not more than 10 to 15 rupees more at best, right? So if you say whatever basket values are and then what you pay to the credit card company versus how much extra does it cost you to do a COD, it's not more than 10-15 rupees. And if you actually build, some data analysis, you'll realize probably that is getting set off by a few multiples in your cost of acquisitions and your repeats itself. And at a mature stage also, probably you can, if you're a customer, you won the loyalty, I don't think a customer will mind paying that extra $10 of, whatever service fee or whatever you...
COD comes with probable returns, right?
Yeah, because, it's like, what India are you going after, right? The fundamental problem that e-commerce today solves is that it is leapfrogging the, development of organized retail, right? And if that thesis is right, then you're going after Bharat more than India. And
दिन में आ जाएगा नहीं तो 7-8 दिन में आ जाएगा. I actually think that part of the e-commerce promise and building the sector in India is around making sure that your customer experience is trying to be as to the point as possible, and making sure that if you promise, whether it's 4, so the question to the panel is whether it's 4 days or 2 days, does that matter more, or does it matter more that it actually reaches when it's promised?
So, the question is very clear. I mean, if
I think it is not about days. I think it is about can you deliver on your promise. I have one business where fundamentally that business is structured where it cannot deliver less than 7 days, right? Because we don't take inventory, we buy after we sell and all that stuff. But there also we did a lot of customer analysis, and what we realized was it was not as important to, the fight was not in hours and days. The fight was, are you honest? Do you as a company know that if you're saying that, hey, I will deliver you in 6 days, and you delivered in 5.5 days, he's a happy customer. But if you say I deliver in 1 day and then you deliver in 2 days, he's still a very unhappy customer.
Because trust is based on customer expectations.
Still under promise, over deliver. We've got a little bit of time, very little, so I'll take the gentleman in the black coat back there, and there's one more question after that, sir. And what I'll do is, the last gentleman, number 8, we probably will not have time, so what I'll do is I'll request my panelists on stage to share their email addresses, so that you can question them, and maybe some of them may be here after that. So,
hi, my name is Pankaj Sharma.
Could you speak a little louder, Pankaj?
Okay. I had a company called Pay24 System. We help to extend e-commerce to unbanked population by providing a payment system. My question is, there was a comment that when a organization has to choose a technology DNA, a retail DNA, or a marketing DNA, it was suggested that it should be a technology DNA. But what happens when there is already existing market which is being served to end user, and now through e-commerce or a new mechanism you are trying to serve them again? But for delivering a real value to a customer, that why he shift from existing to a new model, there should be definitely a retail DNA, what has been an understanding till date. And here there is a question or a suggestion that it should be a technology DNA. If some more light can be...
So maybe I can take that on. So I think maybe you're confusing the words consumer and the word retail. So I think nobody here is denying that you need consumer insight, DNA. By retail DNA, we mean brick and mortar DNA, which is very different from consumer insight. I think technology without consumer insight is a cruise missile without guidance, right? So you need, I think the point when the word, when I would assume that, and Harish could probably, correct me, when he said that technology over retail, he probably meant basically consumer insight backed by data over brick and mortar experience.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.